the Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpey. Torpey are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpey's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpey website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OURGAME to get yourself 10% off. Hello and welcome to the Hurling Game. Myself, Shane Stapleton, as ever, joined by Michael, the Offaly odd job, Verney. How are you doing, Verney?
All good, Shane, yeah.
Yeah, we're causing a bit of a stir here on social media. We've thrown up a poll asking people out there, do you believe that Limerick are being refereed unfairly? Now, it's just a little snap poll, just done over the space of 40 minutes. So far, 74.5% of people think that they're not being refereed unfairly. Some of the comments coming in, Paul Martin, no, they should just focus on not committing so many fouls, and then maybe the refs won't keep blowing them up. Kieran O'Brien says, don't think so. There's just a massive overreaction in the league in general, which is basically Waterford Crystal / co-op level because of lack of match practice for both teams and the referees. I'd be stunned if we see as many frees come championship. Michael Mulvihill wouldn't say unfairly, but it's clear the interpretation of rules have changed as the game is now less physical. Limerick, as one of the most physical teams with a focus on swarm tackling, are feeling the brunt of this right now. A couple of more comments coming in, and we will look to get through all those comments, so please keep coming in with them. I actually even noticed the stat from Conan Doherty. Of the 12 teams across Division 1 of the National Hurling League, none of them have conceded more frees than Limerick. Over just 3 games, the All-Ireland champions have coughed up a total of 32 points from fouls they've committed. Laois are the closest, one shy of them. Westmeath, after that, have given up 127 from frees and penalties. What do you reckon, Michael Verney? Are they being refereed unfairly?
I tell you, just flying down through that, actually, Conan's stats were it's percentage of total scores conceded from frees. So 45% of what Limerick have conceded has been from frees. Dublin 41, Wexford 41, Galway 36, Laois 34, Clare 33, Waterford 33, Cork 31, Limerick 31, Antrim 29, Kilkenny 26, and Westmeath 25. So it's fairly damning to say that you've conceded 45% of your scores from frees. Are they being refereed unfairly? I would say a tad unfairly, but they're definitely not helping themselves. A lot of the focus in the close season last year was, on some of the, shall we say, cynical fouls maybe, and, maybe how robust they were in their tackling. There's definitely been a closer eye on them. And I was just chatting to Big Dan the other day, and Dan, I always find it, if you chat to somebody from Limerick, they have a skin in the game. They're, it's just natural that no more than if I talk to you about Tipp or Dublin, and if I talk myself about Offaly, you're going to have some bias to it. But Big Dan has no skin in the game when it comes to Limerick, and he was just saying, he says they're coming under pressure from a lot of stick from last year, and referees are very hard on them coming into this year. They've really went to town on them a bit this year, he said. Some decisions are not going their way, and they've been watched a bit more than they were the last couple of years. I played against Kilkenny teams that lived on the edge, and I don't think Limerick are doing anything wrong. Whether it's a free or not, I just think they've been blown this year. Limerick live on the edge. That's why they're champions. That's why they're the best team in the country. And he just said, these fellas are huge men. And there's a point on this as well. Now, it's not necessarily what Dan is saying, but there is a point on their physicality. He just said, Derek Burns is 6'4" at wing back. Hannon is 6'2". Kyle Hayes is 6'5". Mother of God, I don't think the Munster second row is that big. And I just think Limerick have been watched because they're so physical. Other teams are getting away with the challenges, whereas they're not. There is a point on that, I think, because they're so big. It's almost like, if a 5'9" guy runs into a tackle with them, and all of a sudden, they're not coming up square against each other. It's kind of nearly that the big man has been punished for, putting an arm in, and because it's a smaller opponent, maybe it's going around his neck, whereas with a bigger opponent, they'd just be kind of hip to hip and it wouldn't be a free. So I do think there is a point in that. Now, the caveat is they're definitely not helping themselves at all. They are by far the most robust tackling team in the country. And as Dan says, they live on the edge, but you kind of live and die by that edge too at times.
Sure, if you're not on the edge, you're not there at all. But I think we have kind of made that point because there's be a lot of Limerick fans out there who think if you criticise the team at all, you've got it in for Limerick and all this kind of stuff, and you're bitter and you want to see Limerick knocked off.
It's not criticism, though, Shane. It's
No.
a statement of fact. Like,
Yeah, and
they're the facts, like.
And it's a point there to be discussed. And I think my reaction a couple of weeks ago was to say it's a bit like Aidan O'Shea syndrome, that because he's the biggest man on the field in a lot of cases, that when he goes in and tackles, he's blown quite quickly because he might send the guy backwards. Whereas if someone tackles him, he might be fouled and he might be impeded in terms of trying to use the ball or move a certain direction. But because he's such a big guy, he's not given it. So there's an element of that with Limerick. But you are playing on the edge. I mean, all good teams do it. Do you remember back in 2009? All this talk about Kilkenny playing too far on the edge. I think it was 2009, because Tommy Walsh was focused in on big time after that Galway game in Tullamore, which I think was Galway's first game in the Leinster Championship, which means it was 2009. And by the end of the championship, Tommy Walsh is the last man holding the ball at the end of the All-Ireland final. He wins Hurler of the Year, he wins Man of the Match, all that kind of stuff. Playing on the edge is the right thing to do. But there is sort of a price to pay when it goes slightly wrong. A bit like Tadhg Morley. He was very unlucky to get sent off last week because in the slow-mo replay, it looked like he was just trying to get out of the way of the Roscommon man. But at full speed, it looked like he took the head off him. I thought red card, and then later I thought not. So because Limerick are so fast, strong, and physical, and they're looking to get those tackles in, sometimes it just is going to look a little bit ugly to the referee, and he's going to have to take action. That's just kind of how it is.
Yeah, and there's probably an element to it as well that's where, like, at the second half of the Munster final last year, Waterford were in a bit of trouble, and I genuinely think it was a tactic. Just run at them, just try and draw frees, just try and get ourselves back into the game. Now, I don't think necessarily, like John Kiley mentioned about simulation, I don't think teams are throwing themselves to the ground or anything like that, but teams are going into the tackle and inviting that robust tackle. And if the referees are giving them, would you not be a fool not to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I spoke to Henry Shefflin yesterday about this, and are Limerick kind of victims of bringing up the whole topic of simulation? Now people are just focusing more on how they tackle. And you can check out that interview with Henry Shefflin that was done yesterday. That's on the Our Game playlist, in the interview playlist on YouTube. Certainly, yeah. So looking at those...
Just a quick one, Shane. A little aside, you mentioned that first game Galway played in Leinster. I've never actually... I'd say only about 4 or 5 people know this, but Kilkenny were 2-9 to win that game, and I was punting a good bit at the time and looking for a bit of value. So I actually gathered together 900 quid and put 900 on Kilkenny and Boyle Sports on the way up to the match. I remember having a big envelope in my pocket with a load of 50s, and I think, like, Canning got a goal at the start, and I think maybe 10 minutes into the second half, Galway were up by 5 or 6 points or something like that. And
you must have been sweating bullets.
Oh, big time, yeah. And because we actually trained with Offaly in Killearn that day, and we got tickets for the match in Tullamore, went on to, and I was with some of the Offaly boys, and like I was getting very animated with 10 or 15 minutes to go, and like when Kilkenny banged in a couple of goals, I think Eddie Brennan got a goal, and like I was like far too over the top. Someone had to suspect that something was up, but I doubt they reckoned I was putting 900 down to win 200.
Ridiculous. So you're betting on a competition that you were in. You'd be expelled these days for that sort of crack.
Yeah, potentially, actually. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to wag the finger on that one a little bit.
That's an interesting angle. There were many different angles you could have taken there. I wasn't expecting that angle.
Well, I'm just looking to come down hard on you, and you were a teacher at the time as well. So just bad examples all around. Do you know another thing from that day is Galway came in and they started the game brilliantly, and Joe Canning got a great goal. And at the time, didn't he do that? John Cena, you can't see me. And as a big wrestling man, you must have been loving that even more.
I wasn't loving it when I had 900 quid in the opposition. I can tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, the match this weekend, Limerick against Cork. I'm very excited to see this match because I don't think Cork are in any way going to pull up for this. I'd say we're both very interested to see what team Limerick name this time. Are they going to try some more young lads? We saw the likes of Quinlan and I think Conor Boylan got another chance, Robbie Hanley, and Cathal O'Neill has been given chances. You know, a lot of these young players that we know are going to come through and be very important players for the treaty as time goes on. Do you think that Limerick will continue with this policy? They don't have a win yet. If it's, you know, I mean, if you'd contrast it with last year, 10 wins from 10 in league and championship, they're going very much the other direction this year. At some stage, they need to halt that and get a win or two on the board. They'll certainly beat Westmeath, I think, and I'm not trying to be unfair to Westmeath, but look, let's just call a spade there. But do they want to get a win against one of the top challengers?
I'd imagine so, but something, Shane, that we've talked about before, and I think it's it's an interesting point now. These guys that are coming into the Limerick team, they're not coming into a Limerick team that's playing particularly well, or they're probably not coming into a Limerick team, that's primed physically. So it's a difficult one for them. Cathal O'Neill came in against Galway. Most guys around him, apart from Seamus Flanagan, were struggling. Quinlan came in against Waterford when most guys around him were struggling as well. So it's a different one. Like, usually when you're getting your chance, you'd be coming into a team, a steady enough team where lads are flying. Limerick haven't been flying. And as a result, then, the new guys that have come in haven't really set the world alight either. Like, you're asking, like, are they going to continue to experiment? To a certain extent, they're going to have to. Kyle Hayes is suspended. Seamus Flanagan is suspended from the Waterford game, the wake of the Waterford game. Obviously, Dermot Burns is back. But there's your centre back gone, or your wing back, and there's your full forward gone. So there's definitely going to be chances for guys there. It's only naturally. But as I said, they're coming into a team maybe that's not firing on all cylinders. If one of those guys, one of those newcomers, does come in and light it up, I think they'd have, not that they have a great chance of holding on to the jersey, but they have a great chance of featuring heavily later on in the summer, because they will stand out amongst, at the moment, a side that's not playing particularly well, where a lot of individuals aren't just, it's only like a 6.5 performance out of 10 for most of them. But they're gonna have to, it's not gonna be by choice necessarily. He's definitely gonna have to shuffle the deck even a bit more.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what sort of team Cork put out for this game. Some of the matchups that we're going to see from Cork in this game, because they've got so much pace and they've got so much scoring power. I mean, even if you look at the scoring differential after 3 games. Now, I know this is, the 33-point win over Westmeath, so that's going to skew things massively. But they're plus 40 after 3 games, 5 points out of 6 available. They are, out on their own at the top of Division 1A there. But some of the matchups that I'm interested to see is, and I'd love to know if Robbie O'Flynn is going to start, if he's ready to come back. He got a hamstring injury 3 weeks ago. It's probably too soon for the likes of him. But who's going to go up against the likes of Kyle Hayes if he's wing back? So with all that pace that Cork have, are they going to try and give him something to worry about going the other way? He's obviously a fabulous player and is so versatile. He can play wherever he likes. Is Dermot Burns going to be straight back into the team now after his suspension? Will Luke Meade play centre forward and try to kind of play off Declan Hannon, assuming that Hannon starts? And like the real feature of Luke Meade is that now that he's in at 11, and I'm sure he moves around in different games, and Cork people can get on there and let us know how they reckon their team is going to set up. But like, he's looking to kind of play off and get runners off the shoulder, and Cork are really trying to go down the guts. And with the fouling that we've talked about from Limerick, that record there, surely if any team is going to test them out, it's the pace and directness that Cork are showing at the moment.
Big time. They're going to try and break the line. They're going to try and create a load of goal scoring opportunities again. So it'd be interesting to see that Cork have almost trying to avoid the tackle. I remember one time we were using, or someone mentioned with Johnny Pilkington was managing us with Borough about using tackle bags. He said, boys, why would you want to use the tackle bag? You're trying to avoid the tackle, not go into it. That's essentially what Cork will be trying to do before the contact comes. A lot of the time, they'll be trying to offload to a runner, or they're trying to deliver a stick pass inside. But it's going to be interesting to see if they can turn that kind of Limerick half back line. We see how good they are with the ball. But they haven't maybe been put on the back foot that much. Now, a lot of the reason why Limerick generally don't cough up that many goal scoring chances. Jack Fagan's goal the other day, I don't even know if you'd classify it as a chance necessarily. It was a speculative ball across and a brilliant catch when he caught Kyle Hayes flat-footed. So, if Cork create 4 or 5 goal scoring chances, that would be probably more opportunities than Limerick have coughed up in any game in recent times. So that's going to be interesting. And I know you talked about matchups from a Cork point of view, but it'd be interesting to see what Limerick will try and do with Mark Coleman, who's totally dominating games and orchestrating games. Will they try and really force him to defend? While Hayes is missing this weekend, I'm still kind of half wondering, could we see Kyle Hayes at centre forward for the Munster semi-final? And I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility, particularly if the attack maybe remains as blunt as it has been up until this. They do probably have a surplus of defenders, so I still don't think that's gone out of the equation. Will they try and put Cian Lynch at centre forward, have him going everywhere and anywhere, and playing the ball around Coleman. I think that's really interesting. Coleman has gotten 30 or 40 touches in nearly every game they've played so far. And that mightn't happen Saturday, but when they play in the Munster final, like Limerick will be trying to keep him to probably 15 touches at most.
Haven't we had some of the most thrilling games in the last few years when it's Limerick and Cork matching up against each other? How could you forget that that Munster round robin clash in 2018? You know, at this stage, neither Limerick nor Cork were looking well. I mean, obviously they probably felt internally that they were building towards an All-Ireland challenge, and they'd later meet in the All-Ireland semi-final, which was another absolute classic. And then they met in 2019, and Cork got that win that probably not everybody was expecting. But I just think we're seeing really good game after really good game with these two teams. And I think that day, we had talked about it afterwards about Mark Coleman going as the sweeper and the spare man at the back for Limerick that day. And not everyone was totally convinced of his performance that day. I actually thought he did very well when you consider that, you know, he was a young guy. He got blocked down a couple of times, but I thought his position was always really good. And I thought he got around the field well and actually used the ball really well. It's just once or twice you get blocked down poorly and it looks really, really bad. So are we expecting another really good game here, or is the shadow boxing going to come in? Do you know what? It feels a little bit lazy to even talk about shadow boxing, but there's sort of a reality of it.
I don't know if there's a shadow box inside from Cork. Like, I think to be fair, I think what you're seeing with them in the league is generally what you're going to see in Championship. Maybe with the odd kind of long kind of ball when they see an opening. But I think they're trying to perfect what they're doing in Championship. Say Tipperary, for example. Are they trying to perfect what they're doing in Championship? I think elements of it, and I think other teams are doing the same. But I'd be fairly confident that what you're seeing with Cork at the moment is probably what you're going to see. I tell you why I think that is because it's so deliberate. It needs so much practice to perfect it. Like, they can't really afford. They've got 5 games before they play Munster Championship. They can't really afford to throw in, you know, one game where they go and do something completely different. And plus, like, one of the games has already been Westmeath. And again, with due respect to Westmeath, they put up a massive score in that game, but they weren't necessarily tested. So I definitely don't see a shadow boxing element from a Cork point of view, and everything, the energy and the eye for green flags that we've seen so far. I do think they'll try. They'll go for that again at the weekend. And as you say, there have been some brilliant games, like that round robin in 18, like the All-Ireland semi-final in 18 was just outrageous. Having watched like a crazy game the night before, and then even Limerick looked unbeatable going into the Munster Championship, and all of a sudden Cork are hammered by Tipp in the first game and they're written off, and then all of a sudden a week later Cork are back on the pig's back, and after kind of handing Limerick one of their first defeats as All-Ireland champions. So yeah, expecting a good game, and expecting the hurling to settle down a good bit more. Week 3 was a lot better than week 1 and 2. And I'd expect week 4 to be better again.
Yeah, teams have had time to breathe a little bit, and after football being so good for a few weeks, you're hoping that hurling can respond this weekend. And, you know, Limerick Cork is the one that we're really looking towards. I think Galway Waterford as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later on.
Yeah, imagine Shane, managers are saying, listen, boys, a lot of people talking bad about hurling and talking very good about football. We need to go out here and loosen the shackles a small bit.
Yeah, Clare Dublin is another one that I think will be tasty enough. A couple of the other ones are a little bit sort of, they have the feel of something that'll be one-sided. Do you know, you mentioned Kyle Hayes there, would he go back to the forwards? And, you know, obviously teams always have to plan for what you're going to come up against when you're playing against Limerick. And I think Cork have been relatively good at doing that, whether it's been Kieran Kingston in charge, like in his previous tenure, or John Myler when he was in charge for a couple of years. Then they found a nice way to nullify that brilliant ball going inside to Gleeson in some of the games. Now, they've still been high scoring, so I'm obviously not suggesting that they've shut Limerick down. Very, very difficult thing to do when they're so good at taking care of the ball and putting it in front of, whether it's Flanagan, you know, Aaron Gleeson, whoever it might be. But you remember a couple of years ago in that match you've talked about when Cork beat the reigning champions as they were in 2019, that Cork got I can't remember exactly who was wing back, but I'm pretty sure Owen Cadigan was fullback that day. Cadigan was very good on Gleeson, and they had, was it possibly Coleman? I'm sure one of our commenters, one of the viewers will be able to just refresh our memories. They just had someone sitting in that pocket right in front of where Gleeson tends to pick up the ball, which is, as his back is to goal, slightly left outside the 14, he'll wheel around, collect the ball, turn and throw it over off his left-hand side. I think Cork have been very good at doing that. And I wonder, will they do that again? And I also wonder, will they have a man marker for Cian Lynch? Because, Cian Lynch is obviously a brilliant hurler, one of the best in the country. His form hasn't been on fire. Will they be looking to try and shut him down again, or will they just hope the collective takes care?
It's funny because I think I think Waterford went after a couple of the pillars the last day and got really physical with Cian Lynch and tried to keep him out of the game. And even Flanagan was doing well, in fairness, but a couple of the other guys as well. Even Hannon, they weren't letting Hannon dictate at all. They weren't letting Hayes dictate on the wing as well. So I do think while Limerick are probably the best example of a real sum of their parts, like if you go after a couple of those pillars, like Lynch is an orchestrator. So much of the good that they do, particularly going forward, he's at the heart of it. Hannon the same. If you can nullify, I would say probably Flanagan and Gallan are in that as well. They're probably their 3 or 4 most important players, particularly offensively. So I do think teams will be targeting those players in particular. Will they go after Lynch to the extent that they're going to go after him in a Munster semi-final? I'm not sure. As I said earlier, I think Cork will definitely focus on what they do well. And I think they'll try to continue doing that because they're trying to perfect something that generally you think they can contend for an All-Ireland this year. I'm not so sure. I think it'll take till next year. But they're trying to perfect something that takes a fair bit of practice. So I think we'll see much of the same from them.
But put it this way, who can't Cork beat? If we're to go over the last couple of years, they've shown that they can beat Limerick, and Limerick can beat most every other team, if not every other team, 4 days out of 5, something like, they look so imperious most days. If you take this league form out of it, last year they were just absolutely unbelievable. I think Cork have had trouble with Kilkenny and their setup. Whatever it is about them, Kilkenny seemed to match up quite well. A couple of years ago in that quarter-final in Croke Park, Cork had themselves in a really good position, but Kilkenny sat back the half-back line. The forwards worked like absolute dogs. And then all of a sudden, even with 20 minutes on the clock, it just felt like game over. Kilkenny have this one. There's no way of turning it around. I think Tipperary and Cork is always a puck of a ball. I think Galway would certainly trouble Cork, but I don't feel like it'd be beyond them to win that game. Whether Cork can put together, let's say they go the direct route and it's Munster semi-final and they win that, Munster final they win that, All-Ireland semi-final final. Whether they can beat 4 top teams, because they will have to beat 4 top teams in a row to do it, or go the back road. I don't know if they can put 4 together, but I think they're capable of beating any team, which to me means you can't rule them out winning an All-Ireland. Eventually Cork will win an All-Ireland again. So this year.
You can't rule them out. As I said, they definitely have the tools to beat nearly most of the top teams on their day. There's definitely an element as a tip man of you playing the reverse thing and almost damage limitation before anything starts. That's what you do. You build them up and you almost become at one with the fact that they could win an All-Ireland. And then anything but an All-Ireland is seen as a success to you and a victory for you.
You're a stook. I don't know what.
I tell you what. There's a fair element of truth to it.
You're raving. We have a comment in there from Shane Keller. He says Mark Ellis was centre back in 2019. Coleman and Downey were the wing backs, which actually
remember Ellis was on the terrace the week before.
I know, yeah,
Tipperary, and then he was called in. I think he actually played with his club. I think he played with Mill Street that night.
Do you think the Gearóid Hegarty thing is? Do Cork have an issue with trying to stop him? Tim O'Mahony may play wing back. He may play in midfield. You don't really know. But do Cork have the right matchup for him? I'm not necessarily sure that Robert Downey would be the right one for him. He's obviously a good player and will keep getting better. I'm not sure he's the right matchup. I'm not sure Tim O'Mahony would, at this point, have the discipline to stay with him throughout the game. Not that he couldn't athletically. I think he could, and he's like a fabulous hurler. But I'm not quite sure he'd have the in-game maturity just yet to do it. I could be wrong, and people get your comments in and disabuse me if you think I'm wildly wrong with that. But what do you think from that point of view? Maybe Niall Cashman's another option. Maybe do you find somebody else more left wing?
It's defensively where you're really looking at that. Like, who have they got to match up with Hegarty and Morrissey and maybe potentially Cian Lynch or maybe potentially Kyle Hayes? And then you're looking at Gallan and Flanagan inside. We know what they're going to offer, and we've talked about it a lot. We know what they're going to offer offensively, but when Limerick are attacking them in waves like that, and they're big ball players and the big guys that make things happen are getting on the ball, how exactly are Cork going to react defensively to that? I think a lot of what we've seen, and it's funny, good Cork teams have generally done this. But actually, can I just say something as well? When Donal O'Grady was last in Cork, you knew the 1 to 9 and 10 to 15 kind of interchange, and different guys came in. Maybe Fraggy came in, Niall McCarthy played, or Timmy McCarthy played. It's nearly the opposite now. You have a fair idea of what 8 to 15 is going to be. 2 to 7 now. It's good. Like, Coleman will probably be 6. If Spillane is fit, he'd probably be 2. But of the other 4 spots, you couldn't be certain of any of them. So while they've been brilliant on the ball, it's just when teams start attacking them and when Limerick get a run on them, how will they be trying to defend against a lot of these kind of big guns? And I think that's the really interesting thing. But the way they've played so far, they've dictated the game enough that teams haven't been able to really exploit them at the back. That's basically they're playing the game on their terms, and that's exactly what they want.
I have to say, I really do like some of their cornerback options, their defensive options, like Sean O'Donoghue, Sean O'Leary-Hayes, Niall O'Leary. They're all really good cornerbacks, and as we've said before, they look very physical and athletic. I think Owen Cadigan's still got something to offer. We probably haven't seen that much of him yet. He did start against Westmeath, but that game was kind of a little bit off Broadway, and it's very hard to judge from that. Colm Spillane, we'll see how he gets on this year. Bill Cooper, actually, who's been such a key player for them the last number of years, he came on the last day, and I wonder will he get himself into the team as time goes on. So again, just get your comments in there and let us know what you think on that. So any final thoughts on this game before we move on?
No, I'm looking forward to it. It's definitely the most interesting game of the weekend, and you're kind of hoping that this kind of lights a spark for some of the other games on Sunday. But very, very intriguing game, and people talk about Chatterbox, and I don't see too much of it, particularly from a Cork side.
And the sun is splitting the stones at the moment, and the way you slated Cork last year, mercilessly, I have to say, the way you slated them and said there's no hope of Cork winning this All-Ireland, and they duly delivered to you, to be fair to you. But the look at the weather, I mean, this is set up for Cork hurling, and I think teams are going to have to plan for them. We talked a lot about how Cork will have to plan for Limerick, but by God, they'll have to plan for them too. The likes of Dara Fitzgibbon running down your throat, Shane Kingston, Alan Cadigan, so on and so forth. There's a lot of really athletic players there. And Mark Coleman. Does Mark Coleman have a hurler year in him? I'm not saying this year, but I think he has it in him.
I think he has it in him. And I said it to you before, is there a hurler with is there a defender with a better first touch than him? His ability to get the ball in his hand really, really quickly is just absolute. Like a defender, Shane, that has a better first touch. Potentially maybe like a Sean Finn, but not on Mark Coleman's level, I don't think. And just on a point that you made there, last year at no stage did I ever think like the Cork were going to upset my prediction or whatever. But there is, if you said Cork having hope win Ireland this year, there is that fear there. There is that fear of just that they can turn it on, and it looks like they're going to turn it on. Will they turn it on enough to beat 4 teams in a row to win an All-Ireland? I'm not so sure. But there definitely is that element of fear that wasn't there the last couple of years.
That's a good point about who has the best first touch as a defender. I would have said Cathal Barrett's got a pretty tasty touch. Ronan Maher is another one. I know I'm just naming Tipperary players there at the moment. Pádraig Walsh would have a very good touch.
It's the speed of actually getting the ball into his hand when he's around the ball. Like, how often does he come out of, if there's a little rucker even there and the ball breaks around him, he ends up with the ball in his hand and he's gone.
Oh, he's like a Venus flytrap with the hand coming out. And not everyone would have probably put him down for centre-back. You would have thought, sweeper. And maybe it is a bit of a hybrid sweeper centre-back thing going on. But his ability to hurl and set up play and sort of, give and go with the ball is... it's looking like a very smooth move at the moment, but remains to be seen if it turns out that way.
No questions asked of him yet. I'm just interested to see when questions are asked of him defensively. That's the real interesting one.
So we'll move on to another game in Division 1A. And by the way, if you're looking to get this on audio podcast, it's something that people have been asking for a long time. Our game has now launched a Patreon supporters club. So that's the place to go. It's linked in the video underneath this on YouTube. You'll also find it on ourgame.ie, but check the video under YouTube, and you can support the show on Patreon here. We're brought to you by Bamboo, the new hurley from Torpey, the bamboo stick. And you'll actually see it in action a little bit later in the show, an episode of Copycats, myself and Nisha Waldron testing out the Jason Ford free from 100 yards near the sideline. We'll come to that in a little while. But we'll talk about Tipperary now.
Just before we move on, Shane, just lastly,
stop interrupting me.
I was chatting to Martin Bretney earlier in the week, and he's a good man for his stats and his history. And he was saying that if Limerick don't win the game at the weekend against Cork on Saturday evening, that this would be the first time that reigning All-Ireland champions haven't won one of their first 4 league games since Galway won their first All-Ireland in a long, long time in 1980. So while it is only the league, like there is a small bit of pressure building. Like they'd love to get a win on Saturday evening and then be able to go into the Westmeath game, maybe try out a few guys, get 2 wins on the board and then go into championship. Sorry for interrupting you, Shane. It's just, this is an all hurling weekend. I'm absolutely on high and it doesn't get much better than this.
Yeah, it sure doesn't. Westmeath against Tipperary this weekend down in Cusack Park. This is a big one for Westmeath in the sense that they just want to get a performance, a few more. It's very tough for them, obviously. Going into, Shane O'Brien talked about it, the manager, going into winter hurling last year was probably a little bit easier than meeting teams now. Firmer ground, ball moving around quicker. Teams really, nobody's had a proper pre-season and they probably haven't had a chance to work on everything they want. So to get hammered the way they were against Galway and Cork was really tough. They obviously ran a much changed Waterford team very closely. But it's been relentless for them. I mean, they really were drawn on the more horrible side of Division 1A. And you just hope that they can kind of run Tipperary a little bit closer. We'll talk about what sort of team Sheedy will put out for Tipperary this weekend. But Conor McKeown spoke with Shane O'Brien this weekend. And he did touch on playing in the month of May on a beautiful summer's day as a different prospect to the muck and dirt in winter. But the biggest difference is we're only a few weeks away from championship. So every team is already looking forward. They're already in championship mode. And he also talked about his approach to playing these games. And he goes, our philosophy as a management team is we're not approaching this league in a defensive way. People would be advising us to play with sweepers and whatever, but we're trying to focus on ourselves and our style of play. We're trying to play a similar style to what we're playing in the Joe McDonagh. That's where our focus is. And do you know what? That's actually something we talked about a couple of years ago when Laois won the Joe McDonagh, then going into the preliminary All-Ireland quarter-final against Dublin, and then the actual All-Ireland quarter-final against Tipperary. It's hard to just sort of turn that around or even look at the football side of things. Remember Carlow were playing Dublin a number of years ago. And if you're playing more attacking in Division 4, do you then just jump in against Dublin and go, like 10 sweepers the next week? It's very hard to change mid-flow from what you normally do.
Yeah, like in fairness to them, they're setting out their stall. They'd love to stay in Division 1, I'm sure. But their goal is, after a disappointing McDonagh campaign last year, is to win the Joe McDonagh. Funnily enough, like they're the only McDonagh team, obviously, that's in getting Division 1 hurling. So you'd think it was the same last year. And you'd think they would, was it the same? Actually, no. Carlow or McDonagh last year. But so they're the only team in there this year. You'd imagine that would stand to them. It didn't stand to them last year. Maybe they tried to, play extra defenders and play to win those games or stay in those games rather than actually think of the long game. What are we going to do here when we're playing the likes of Carlow and Kerry in the McDonagh Cup? So it sounds like they're staying true to what they want to do in championship, and that has to be admired as well. At least when they go to play the McDonagh, they'll know exactly what they want to do. They'll know exactly what way they want to play. It is just a tough one. It's a very, very tough one. They're coming into the most competitive division. It's an absolute shark tank. They had a chance now, and even just as I said, I was chatting to Dan Shannon the other day, and he was very, very worried. He was in at the Waterford Westmeath game, and he just thought like Westmeath had a glorious, glorious chance to win it. Didn't take it. But, if they conceded big scores against Galway and conceded, 7-27 against Cork, that's probably going to happen. When they come up against the McDonagh Cup teams, you'd imagine that they should have a small bit of an edge coming into it with the level of hurling that they're getting at this time of the year. You
just hope that it doesn't affect their confidence. Like, they have a decent spine to that team. There's no doubt about it. Like, Tommy Doyle has been much celebrated at full back from people who know their hurling. Angus Clark's a very good hurling centre back. They've Niall O'Brien, Killian Doyle, Davy Glennon's in there making a decent impact. Josh Coll got 5 points the last day against Cork. So there are good players there. But it's going to be a tough ask against Tipperary. And a lot of this is down to what will Liam Sheedy do here? I mean, he'll expect to get the win, no doubt about that. But is he going to change a lot? Is he going to try and keep his team together? Because it's one thing saying championship's just around the corner and you want to settle on your team now. But there's sort of a risk with injuries too. There's a risk of, right, we've gotten 3 games into the likes of Paddy Maher, Ronan Maher, Barry Heffernan, and so on and so forth, Cathal Barrett. Do we need to sort of dial down a little bit? We found out what happened a couple of years ago in the Munster Championship when we lost Cathal Barrett and Bonner Maher by playing him in a dead rubber game. When did we really need to go all out for this game? I think it's a tough conundrum for Liam Sheedy here. It's that balance between game time but not risking players.
It's tricky enough. It's like the rugby boys would always say about managing minutes. I'd say like I think Barrett's played every minute of the league so far and has been brilliant. Does he need to play this weekend? I don't think so. I think Ronan Maher has played nearly every minute as well. They probably will. I'd say those two are definitely candidates not to play. Paddy's played kind of 2 games in a row. He might play again. Shemi Callan apparently is ready to go and come back in. To be fair, from his point of view, and a couple of guys that are coming in, it's probably an ideal scenario coming into a game like this. Probably a lot less pressure on. Even though when they played in 2017, he got it. He really got it from Jogger Doyle that day. I think he kept him scoreless that day, and I think Callan was nominated for Hurler of the Year before, and had scored 9 points from playing the All Ireland final. But I think he was kept scoreless.
When isn't he nominated for Hurler of the Year?
Huh? That's a fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point. But I think those kind of mainstays that have played all the games so far will be replaced. But I don't think I didn't see more than 5 changes. I'd say, because I still think they want to keep a fair core of that team together. And as we've said before, if you are giving guys their chance, give them a chance with a lot of regulars around them.
Yeah. Would you be bringing Seamus Callan into your fantasy hurling team this week? I know I'm obviously giving it to you in a big way in the league so far. We have the Our Game Diehards League. I'm up around 28th position, not to be sniffed at, and you're lagging behind in 90th position. It's embarrassing. There's plenty. You can do your transfers this week, so get them done at Fantasy Hurling today. But you are lagging behind. Let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah, good man. Throw up that skills competition there from last week where I handed you your ass. I don't know. I wouldn't be taking Callan in this week if I'm honest with you. He generally is the sort of player that needs games under his belt to be at his best. Like even in 2018, he was kind of struggling for fitness. And I think he had a bit of a back injury that year. I think he'll play the Westmeath game. He'll probably play the week after then as well, and then he should be cherry ripe for championship. I probably still would probably keep Jason Ford in my team. There's still a chance. I'm very bad, because when the teams come out on a Friday night, you have to change your team. If you don't change your team, then you're goose. So I'll have to. I tell you what. All's fair in love and war. Give me a text on Saturday morning and say, don't forget to change your team. And we'll make a competition of this for the last 2 rounds. Is that fair enough?
I have better things to be doing than texting a channel like you. Hey, let's look at the Tipperary team, though, a little bit more. I presume Brian Hogan will come back in goal because he was due to start the last day and then he got a bit of a concussion. So Barry Hogan has now got 3 games in a row. So, he's obviously staked a decent claim at this stage, and his cousin will want to remind Liam Sheedy that he's a great option too. He's obviously won an All-Star a couple of years ago. So I think Brian Hogan will come into the team. I'd imagine Robert Byrne will get another start because he did himself no harm at all in that game against Galway. I'd imagine Paddy Cadell this is all, injury dependent. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but I'd imagine Paddy Cadell will start. I wonder, will Jake Morris get the start? I'm looking at someone like Mark Keogh, assuming he's fit, Paul Flynn, or guys like this, Brian McGrath. Maybe Brian McGrath would be thrown in full back, and maybe Paddy Maher, who, maybe Liam Sheedy already knows what he's going to get from Paddy Maher if he plays him full back. So he might just say, do you know what, I'll give the likes of Brian McGrath a go back there instead.
Yeah, I'd say Brendan Matter will probably play too, because he hasn't started a game yet. So he's likely to play. Would they be playing Dan McCormack? I wouldn't be. If you're going to leave him off in the game, I'd be leaving him off in this game. Alan Flynn obviously came off early. I think it was the Galway game he came off early.
Yeah, after 47 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, so he could play again, but I think it's funny. The more than when 4 or 5 years ago when Bonner was the most important player, even 10 years ago, what Sheedy does with Alan Flynn, Dan McCormack, and Michael Breen, to me, is massive, because the ground those 3 guys can cover, particularly against the Limericks and probably the Corks of this world, I think if anything, like those guys are nearly three of the most important players, and that's not to say that they'll all start on a given day. But like if you're playing Limerick, you want Dan McCormack, I think you want Alan Flynn, you want Michael Breen, just because physically they can front up to. They can, if Breen is playing midfield, he can front up to a Will O'Donoghue or whatever. He can help out your wing back. He can cover Garrod Hegarty. Same with Alan Flynn, can front up to Keane Lynch or whoever. Dan McCormack is actually like Tipp's most important player nearly at this stage. I think he's nearly the new Bonner. He's so important to them. The work he gets through. Sometimes it's funny, you don't necessarily, and this is no disrespect to him, and I think he knows himself, he doesn't necessarily want to be shooting the whole time. But the ball can tend to almost wind up in his hand and he ends up taking shots. And they do go over, of course they do. But I think his work rate is just something that probably no other player can bring to Tipp. And to me, I actually think he's their most important player at the moment.
Yeah, and like the thing is, I've seen him knock over 5 points from play for Borris. So maybe it's just, I think it's something psychological when he's playing for Tipperary rather than not having the ability to do. Because I think
I'd go with that, yeah.
I wonder, will Dylan Quirk get another chance to start? It just didn't happen for him the last day. It hasn't really happened for him in his league appearances this year. But he's certainly somebody that Liam Sheedy seems to like. And it's pretty clear that the talent is there. This might be the right game for Dylan Quirk to go out there and kind of, just show his manager what he can do, because Tipperary should be on the front foot. He should get a bit of ball into the hand. So, and the other thing is Michael Breen. Will Michael Breen end up fashioning himself as an impact sub if, from the start of these games, it doesn't quite happen for him? We can all see, the Kevin McManaman type impact he could have, because if you're tired and this lad who's a ball of energy and power comes onto you, it's a nightmare. So that might be something that Liam Sheedy's thinking about.
Well, look at what he did to Adrian Toohey last day, who was having a good game. All of a sudden, this absolute beast comes on at 100%, and there is no way, with the best will in the world, there's not anybody that has started the whole game that's going to be able to stick with him near the end. There's just not. And I think if you can get it into that sort of a lad's head that you're going to be coming on around the 45-minute mark, you're going to be playing for half an hour. The damage, you can do more damage in that half an hour than you could maybe in the 70 minutes if you started. And I think that he's a massive weapon for them. It's just so powerful. And generally when he shoots, he scores as well. His conversion rate from shots is very, very high too. So he could be an absolute killer coming in at the end of a game.
Yeah, the comments are flying in, and as always, we're delighted to hear from you. So keep those flying in. John Collins says it's a good opportunity for Tipp to roll out Owen Connolly of Cashel and Alan Tynan. Alan Tynan, who of course was with the under-20 Ireland rugby team, was also with Munster on Academy. I'm not sure how many games he played for the first team. I'm not really a massive rugby fan, but I went down a YouTube wormhole of watching him recently, and he's a great physical player. So whether he's got the hurling nice and sharp to come back in after a few years away from it is another thing. Owen Connolly looks like a guy that as he fills out, he's got most of the things required. So it could be a good one to throw him out in. He certainly was. Both of them were named in the panel the last day, so we'll wait to see on that. Michael Lucy says, lads, love the show. Can I ask you what you think of Dublin versus Clare? What do Dublin need to do to make a breakthrough? Can we do it with the current setup? We need the buzz of Daly's days to return. As a Matty Kenny fan, I'm going to have to, be a little bit upset with that comment. But no, I mean, we'll come to that Dublin and Clare in a little while. But
as Matty Kenny's PR man, you're not happy.
You have me down as a Goebbels for Tipperary and a PR man for Dublin. It's hard to know what.
I don't think I'm wrong either, to be honest.
Yeah, says Mr. Kilkenny fan there with the Stockholm syndrome. Another comment in from John Collins. To win in All-Ireland, I think Cork need to put in a little more steel in the centre of their defence and specifically in front of their goal. Less ball playing, more defence. But we're building and it's intriguing. Bill Cooper could offer for Mark Coleman if he was to return, a good reader of the game and not afraid to work. So we'll move on now to the next game that we have in the pecking order here. So Galway against Waterford. Big Dan, you said you were talking to him earlier in the week. He has expectations for Waterford, doesn't he?
Well, I think it's I don't think it's just his expectations. It's the expectations within the county just from being in an All-Ireland final last year and kind of making that sort of breakthrough. And it's an interesting one because he was there obviously as a player in 2009, having been in the 08 final, and then he was there as selector coach in 18, having nearly scaled the mountain in 17. So he does bring kind of interesting perspective to the table. But he just said there's a lot more expectation after last year, and even after beating Limerick the last day, he said I'm driving around in my job there with Comroyle, and people are saying, "Jeez, Waterford are back." they'll take beating. He said, you're judged on what you win, and that's trophies. Waterford had a fantastic win against Limerick, don't get me wrong, but there was no trophy at the end of the day. Limerick played them twice in Championship last year and won both. He said, the pressure is unbelievable within the county. He said, the year we got to the final in 08, the year after, the expectation is on you. He said, it's second year syndrome for Liam Cahill. The rabbit is out of the hat, and they're up there now with the top 3 or 4 teams in Ireland. Last year, they were there coming in 9 or 10 and did a lovely draw, 1 win into the Munster final. This year, this is the expectation, he's saying, within the county. The expectation is to beat Clare, run the legs off Tipp, you love that one, and get to a Munster final. That's the expectation. That's what people are saying, but it's not that simple. He says Tipp are a different animal compared to last year, and Clare are waiting in long grass. He said people fear Waterford now, and by the fear, he means they respect them now. They know what to expect. Whereas last year they exceeded expectations. So I do think that's interesting. There's almost like a nice it's almost like a nice feeling when people don't expect that much of you and you kind of have a point to prove. Whereas this year you got so close, and yeah, you have a point to prove, but the pressure is actually on you this year. The pressure is on you to maintain the level of performances. The pressure is on Stephen Bennett. Can he maintain like the best year of his career by a country mile? Can he get up to those levels? Can Austin Gleeson get up to those levels where he hit 4 or 5 in the All-Ireland final? Can he maintain that? So there is a fair bit of pressure on him this year. Well, obviously from within there is anyway.
But are they playing like they have pressure? The first day against Cork, they were terrible. You know, they conceded 5 goals and could have been more. And, you know, we've said it a few times already. They got 1-3 in garbage time to take the bad look off the scoreline. Much changed team against Waterford. We won that by 3 points. Westmeath. Very hard to know what to take from that. And then against Limerick, they were 10 points to 5 down before Limerick went down to 14 men. So, yes, they won that game. They beat the reigning All-Ireland and League champions and maybe got that monkey off their back that they can't beat them. But I don't know. I'm not totally convinced that Waterford can kick on again this year. You know, and like at what stage will it come home to roost that the likes of Tyke de Burka, Stephen O'Keefe, I know Billy Nolan's doing well. You know, at what stage will that come home to roost? Because I don't know. Like the talk, yeah, they'll run the legs off certain teams. I don't know. I'm not fully convinced. I think they're a really good team. But if you're talking about pecking order, I'd have Limerick ahead of them. I'd have Tipp ahead of them. I think they're right there alongside Kilkenny. Obviously, you have to go on that result last year and put Waterford just ahead. I put Galway ahead of them. Probably not too many more teams ahead of them there. Obviously, I said Limerick, I'm pretty sure there. So, you know, where do you put them in the pecking order?
Yeah, probably around 4 or 5, I'd say. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'd flip-flop between them and Kilkenny just on the fact that they're missing Tyke de Burka. O'Keefe is a big loss as well, but it does look like they have, you know, a good understudy there for the last couple of years. I don't think that will hurt them as much as the Burka. And then you have, how do they fill that number 6 position? And while Austin Gleeson was outstanding against Cork up front, he didn't play against Westmeath, he was back at number 6 the other day. It brings up the debate again, is where is his best position? Big Dan thinks centre forward and thinks that he's more of a threat, and you generally know what you're going to get out of him in attack. Whereas in defence, we've seen it and we've talked about this in the modern game. Like, they're not going to lower the ball down on top of him. They're going to play a deep line centre forward and he's going to float around and try and get 4 or 5 points from playoff. And that's just the way it is now. I think he's best served up in attack, but he could be playing in attack this weekend. We don't know. Maybe it was just something that they were trialing. Maybe it's something they'll trial if they play Limerick again. That they'll try and, you know, hold what they have at the back and go really strong at the back, and maybe think that Shane Bennett or Stephen Bennett and a couple more can make the impact up front. Maybe he'll play horses for courses depending on who they're playing. But yeah. I don't know if you can do that with a centre back. I'm not sure. I think you might be able to do it, move a guy from centre forward to midfield or something like that. But I don't know if you can be chopping and changing a centre back.
Is there any reason they can't do with Austin Gleeson what Wexford do with Lee Chin, which is just tell him float? At times you're back in your own half and not playing as a centre back, but the other team will want to man mark you and not let you roam free. We're going to start you full forward. You're going to operate in your own half and try and come on people's shoulders and burst up the field, and you've got your only responsibilities to try and get on the ball. And then at times move back in full forward and try and just confuse the other team and create space for him. I don't know. I think he can play centre back, but that's not the route I'd go down.
Yeah, no, potentially he could play that type of a role. He's physically definitely maintained all the work he did last year. He can get up and down the pitch as good as anybody. So I wouldn't rule it out. As long as you not that it's defined, but just as long as he's not like lost in playing that role, as long as Waterford know that, okay, if they have the ball and they're building up to 45, Ozzy's going to be close by and you're feeding him. As long as everybody knows that he should be fed like that, I think that could work. And as I said, he was the shining light against Cork. He was one of the only ones that played well in attack. So if you're taking that big kind of focal point away from the attack, you'd be a bit worried then, would it be a bit blunt up front? But I would personally keep him in attack. And if you're going to go play in centre back, you'd be playing him there from the start and trying to build a team around it and get a lot of consistency there. But not sure. It's interesting to see. Maybe he won't be playing. Maybe playing up front again this weekend.
Yeah, we're coming up to 4 years since these two teams played in an All-Ireland final, and they're much changed actually, because we're just looking at them here. If you go through the Waterford team, and I'll just call them out. So Stephen O'Keefe not there, Noel Connor's not there, Barry Coughlin not there, Shane Fives is there, Philip Mahoney not there, Kieran Bennett is, Dara Fives has been injured a lot, Kevin Moran in and out of the team throughout this league, Jamie Barron is obviously there, Jake Dillon in and out, Austin Gleeson is there, Pádraig Mahoney's been injured, Shane Bennett was gone and is back again. Brick Walsh, he's retired. So it is very, very much changed. On the Galway side of things, Colin Callanan is no longer playing. Dahi Burke is there, Adrian Toohey, John Hanbury's gone. Pádraig Mannion is still around, Grode McInerney, Aidan Hart, Johnny Cohen, David Burke. Actually, a lot of these are still there. Joseph Cooney, Cathal Mannion, Joe Canning, Conor Whelan, Jonathan Glynn is gone, and Conor Cooney. So there actually is there's far more changeover in the Waterford side than there is in the Galway's.
And even when you go down through the Galway team, they're generally nearly all playing in around the same positions as well.
Is that continuity or is it staleness?
Yeah, it's a fair question too. But I think, I don't know who could usurp any of those guys that are still in there. Like they've still got Brian Kincannon in. Would say they've still got Jarlath Mannion coming in, Darren Morrissey maybe coming in defence, Sean Loftus as well. So they've sprinkled it as. Cyril Farrell always says to me, he always uses the analogy of the jigsaw. Michael says, they have all the pieces, just a matter of putting them together.
Well, he's not wrong there, to be fair.
Yeah.
Now, we'll move on to the next match, Kilkenny against Laois. That's going to be in Division 1 Group B. Kilkenny are top, and I think this will pretty much confirm their status as finishing top in 1B. They're going to be up against a Laois team that's been finding it hard going of late. Just even go through some of the absentees that they've had, like Chad Dwyer was missing against Clare, as was Ryan Mullaney and Podge Delaney. And then add that into the long-term injury list of John Lennon, Mark Kavanagh, Willie Dunphy, Stephen Maher, and Ian Lyons. It's rough going. It has been very, very rough going for Cheddar Plunkett. And it's hard to look past a heavy win for Kilkenny here. Yeah,
it's tough coming in. You can come in with all the hoopla you like, but when you're missing, some of your best players, it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult to overcome that. You need all your best personnel available to you. Interesting, actually, and this might raise your ear a bit more. He just had some comments this week. Cheddar was saying that a lot of Laois's work has been fitness-based, as their levels at the start of the year were a long way from where I'd expect an inter-county team to be. Obviously, your current Coola coach, Eddie Brennan, was involved last year. I wonder is it that a subtle, the people's eyebrow? I wonder is that a subtle dig? If you'd looked at Laois against Dublin last year, you would not have said that Laois were as fit as the majority of the other inter-county teams. So
that
he
is a
may
fair
have a point.
We did talk about that at the time and say they don't look quite as athletic as Dublin. Whether that's the fault of any one person in particular is another thing, because it was an odd year with COVID. Laois, I think, looked physically in better nick in 2019 when they obviously had the relative success that they had. But 2020 then, because you're away and sort of looking after yourself, and this was probably at a stage when teams and groups weren't meeting up sort of surreptitiously and doing their own bit when they weren't supposed to. I think everyone was fully taking it seriously, the lockdown and every single restriction. So I don't know. It's very difficult to know. But you're obviously just trying to get a wind up on me. I'm only training with Eddie for 2.5 weeks, and I'm letting him get his feet under the floor. But obviously he's very good so far.
I'm only saying that tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I know you are, but it's an interesting point from Cheddar. But is he trying to pick up on the slack of maybe players not fully being doing what they should have done? Because certainly Laois looked very good in 2019.
Yeah, no, they did, in fairness. Just a couple of other things as well about what Cheddar has said about how they've been going so far. They've obviously, coughed up, I think 227 and I think it was 4-17 the first day against Wexford.
30 points against Dublin as well.
Yeah, so he just said we're still giving away a ball too easily. We're trying to work ball smartly through the lines, and it's going to take time to execute that really well. We're still giving away a few frees. We need to get better technically. These teams put the foot in the gas, as Clare did in the second half. Clare dominated and really won the game in the first 15 minutes of the second half. Our priority is to get everybody back as quick as we can, but clearly that's not going to be easy. Difficult when you're basically hoping to salvage things by having guys back for a championship, and even when they're coming back for championship, they have no game time under their belts. So like you're just picking from a smaller deck, and while other counties can afford to be missing, you know, a handful of guys, the likes of Laois, no more than an Offaly or an Antrim or anything like that, you just can't afford to be missing the quality of player that they're missing at the moment.
As I said, there's an interview with Henry Shefflin up on our game, so have a look at that if you like. But he certainly believes that Kilkenny are not too far off. He still has Limerick at number 1, Galway, and then maybe Kilkenny aren't too far after that, and he's kind of put Tipperary in around the same level as well. But he was talking about some of the players that have looked quite good. He's happy to see Adrian Mullen getting another 70 minutes under his belt. He was impressed certainly by James Bergen at times during the league. Billy Ryan scoring 1-4 the last day. So things aren't looking too bad for Kilkenny. And Shefflin said that on the Kilkenny negotiating the sweeper system, especially last week against Wexford, when Lee Moe McGovern really couldn't get himself into the game, and how last year's collapses are in the rearview mirror, obviously dropping double-digit leads against both Dublin and Waterford in the All-Ireland semi-final. He goes, psychologically, it was a boost that they won well. It wasn't a scrappy game. I think Kilkenny had a great variety in their play. They seem to have figured out Wexford's sweeper system and the way they play through the lines for the first time when they really cracked it. All these psychological doubts creep in, but the meltdowns against Dublin last year and against Waterford in the semi-final are very much in the rearview mirror. It remains to be seen, actually, in the white heat of battle in Championship, because you just don't know what you got from Wexford last week. Were they flogged a couple of days before? I mean, maybe that's doing a disservice to Wexford, or actually maybe they're as bad as that first half suggested, but they finished with a much stronger team. Still, you have to be very complimentary of Kilkenny and how they used the ball. They worked it around. They played lovely diagonal balls in front of their inside line. So they are looking good. So what do you make of that and what Shefflin said with the rearview mirror for the meltdowns?
You can't. I don't. I think you want to think that. You can't for certain know that until they, you know, have a 7 or 8 point lead in a game, maybe later on this summer, and the team starts coming back at them. Do you know what I mean? They squandered 2 leads that you just would never have seen from a Kilkenny team under Brian Cody before. So I think it's a bit premature to say it's in the rearview mirror. They are motoring nicely enough. Just as something, and I only kind of copped it looking back, Kilkenny did only have 5 scorers when they scored 227 against Wexford. Henry Shefflin, the next Henry Shefflin, TJ Reid scored 118 and Billy Ryan scored 1-4. That's 222 between 2 players, and particularly that 118 from TJ Reid. So like there is one guy totally dominating their scoring. Like Wexford had more scorers than Kilkenny, despite, you know, losing the game quite convincingly. So that is still the major worry. If TJ doesn't fire, who's going to pick up the slack? And I think at least Billy Ryan has kind of stepped up, and I know James Bergen was quiet the other day. He's kind of stepped up. Adrian Mullen has gotten loads of game time now. Looks like you could see him hopping off the ground in the middle of July. Definitely. You could see him back to 2019 form. It's going to take up time to get there, but you'd be confident that he might get there. And then obviously you have Richie Hogan, Wally Welch, as they say down in Kilkenny, and a couple of more to come back into the equation as well.
Yeah, that's true. Now keep the comments there; they're flying in. Keep them coming.
So there's abuse about my hair, actually. Like,
a fairly tasty little word to go with it.
Yeah, we won't be repeating it here.
No, we certainly won't. So Mikey K says hurling is becoming far too tactical to the detriment of the game. At times unwatchable. Should try to encourage a long puck up the field. I mean, that is fair, but at the same time, I'm still intrigued with hurling. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think we've reached that time where we're going to look at the Copycats video that I did with Nisha Waldron. I'll just bring it up on screen here, and you can comment as you go, because we know the sort of a smart arse you are, but here it is. Okay, we've seen plenty of instances of lads scoring frees from inside their own 65, almost back to their own 45 during the league in 2021.
You're panting before we even started.
I am. I've been trotting around just putting down cones and stuff.
None of this roll
anyway.
which I hate. I'm a roll lifter. DJ Carey was roll lifter. I'll be a roll lifter too.
He was.
Neither suit me. So this is all Nisha. He's the free taker.
Great to have that honesty. Look at that.
So here we go. It has to be
Nice pale
a
lift.
move, a jab lift on
Absolute
the move.
shaper.
Strike it over the bar. Watch out for his technique here.
No, that was using the bamboo hurley.
It dropped well
I
short.
said we're sponsored by
What you want to be
Torpey and
doing
the
is
bamboo
aiming up
hurley.
the top of the left-hand post when you're
Certainly
striking. If you're
got a
right
nice
from
bit
this
of
far.
purchase with it.
She was going in the right direction,
But can I harness my own power? That's what they're all asking.
Nisha Waldron, free taker. He scored one in All-Ireland Club semi-final against Schlockneil. Can he man up here? Ooh, I think it's going to be short.
Safe to say, Nish is the
I know,
first man to have a cap backwards and a pair of sunglasses on, taking frees.
Anyone that knows me growing up, I grew up on free competitions. So if I lose this, I'll be as sick as a pig.
Yeah. Grew up in Freshford, St. Lactans. Now the rain is starting to come down
Way
there.
to the right.
She's wider, right?
I think
The
we're
rain is
completely
making it more
sacrificing
realistic in
technique
fairness.
for power.
It was raining
Everyone
before
ain't
threw it
getting
over.
Yeah, Nisha Waldron. The crowd falls deathly silent as he drives the ball wide. Ooh, she's online. Ooh, a little short, but rolls into the net. We can't count it.
I think you need to do for a
lovely
miss.
quick little step
You
there
need
to
to
gain
do
power.
that.
That's not a bad strike.
Not a bad
at
sound.
all.
Look at that. Straight over.
We're giving it to me, are we? That's 1-0 for me. Pressure's on, 1-0 to Stapleton. Waldron feeling that pressure.
Calling yourself Stapleton and referring to yourself in the third person.
Oh, he topped that. That was horrific.
But it is sneery. It's taking the piss
So
out
over
of
the
the
capper. Oh, as the rain falls. Now we're really getting after Jason Ford's one here now. It was a wet evening below in Semple Field.
Simple as shit.
Yeah,
That's
he
a great
loves
strike
taking the
against
mickey,
Tipp.
how I call it, Tom Semple's
It's
field.
over. Again, yeah, I think that was over. It's hard to tell from here, lads.
Yeah, on the video review as well to confirm it had gone over.
Leash is absolutely sick.
Would
Ah,
Leeds
missed the
respond
pick-up.
like a
Catch it
champion?
nice.
Missed the pick
Does it
up.
have the legs?
Responded like a champion.
Here we go. The fifth one.
Look at this, the challenge
As
pull.
the rain continues to fall.
How do you respond?
Oh, he
Biggest
wellied
moment.
that. That has to go over.
No big deal.
Don't believe it.
Oh, no. Okay, look, I got the job done. He's the free taker, but I had that bit of extra power, which is what I'm talking about. Nisha, unlook. I was sick as a pig after that. If I lost that, that's cat. Send in your attempt.
Okay, so that's that. Michael Verney, you just give a bit of credit where it's due, surely.
Eddie Brennan, if you're watching, get this man out of the B team and get him on the A team.
And put him in centre back, says I.
Centre
Sean-
back, freeze, line balls, puck outs, you name.
Sean Moore had a good run of it, put me back in. Now, let's move on to the Antrim against Wexford game this weekend. We talked about Wexford's fairly pitiful performance last weekend. Antrim have done pretty good so far this year. Beaten Clare, of course, losing to Kilkenny, but given a fair old run of it that day in Nolan Park. And then the last day out, losing to Dublin, free taking certainly cost them that day. What do you want to see from Antrim in this game? What do you want to see from Wexford?
You'd hope to see a bit more from Wexford than you did in the first half the last day anyway, where some of the tackling was non-existent and they just didn't seem to didn't bring that energy to the table. Like they should have missed training with these COVID contacts and the 2 positive tests. They should have been missing training. So there was very little excuse for them to be as flat as they were the other day. Looked like a kind of a tired team. So like Wexford without energy, it's just like it basically underpins the system that they play. If they're flat or don't have that bounce, it's amazing they can become distinctly average without that energy. That's their X factor. That's what brings them to the table. So like you'd be hoping to see a return to that. You'd imagine that closer to what the team that finished will probably start. As I said, we don't know if Davy was trying to pull the wool over people's eyes or what he was trying to do. I don't know, potentially if he was trying to actually be too smart the other day, but you'd be hoping that you'd see a lot more energy and a lot more enthusiasm from them. From an Antrim point of view, obviously had the high point of the first day, maybe back to reality a bit more, but like I'm wondering, like, is this a big opportunity for Antrim? Antrim who were competitive against Kilkenny for long stages, got the game back level, coming up against a Wexford team that fair enough played well in the first 2 games and put up good scores, but were really, really abject the other day. They're welcoming them up to Corrigan Park again, where they had their only win of the league so far. Like, I wonder, like, this could be another opportunity knocking for them.
Yeah, well, if they find a way of stopping Wexford's plan A, sometimes I wonder, do Wexford have a plan B? And do they kind of get stuck in the mud if it isn't flowing for them? Another thing is, it's live on TG Car, and Antrim have had that bit more exposure this year, and it's great to see them on TV again. And if they can make a game of this and sort of maybe even just getting the free taken right this day, and I mean, lads have off days. You're not slating them, but they performed pretty well against Dublin for the most part. Other than that, an interesting point made by Davy Fitz after the game the last day I was there, and he said that his team wouldn't throw up the white flag. But then you think last October they were beaten by Galway in the Leinster Championship, beaten well, and he said afterwards, we just put up the white flag and saw the game out, and that's very disappointing. But this time he goes, when you're getting well beaten at half time, they were down by 14, they won the second half by 10, by 4 to lose by 10. He says, when you're getting well beaten at half time, the easy thing to do is throw up the white flag. Them Wexford guys will never throw up the white flag. Looking flat is putting a miley when you're 14 down at half time. It isn't a nice place to be, especially when you're playing Kilkenny at home, but I'm proud of the lads. They fought hard. I think we won the second half by 4. So they did, but like he has said, they put up the white flag before. So I mean, you can't but point to that. I mean, he's been very disappointed in the past. It doesn't just change overnight, especially because they're not flying.
No, it's a fair U-turn, isn't it? Now, in fairness,
he's right to say that though, because you don't want to leave it out there that the manager thinks his own players put up the white flag.
Well, I put it to you this way: I wouldn't be that surprised if after Davy came out with those comments the last day, if there were conversations between players and if there was conversations between players and management. I just don't think you can have that in the public. Generally, I just don't think you can. You can have it behind closed doors and you can say, lads, we threw in the white flag, and I'm sure his language would be a lot more colourful than that. But to actually put it out there, it just doesn't give the a show of unity. I just don't think it looks like they're all pulling together. So I don't think those comments that Davy made after the Galway game last year, I don't think he'll ever be publicly making those again. I'd say, and even I think he's become a good bit more coy in his kind of media engagements now. I wouldn't be a bit surprised though if players weren't happy about that. Like I'm sure they knew that night against Galway that they just weren't up to it, and for whatever reason. And I think you can't just blame players, and you have to take responsibility for management as well. So I don't see him coming out with those sort of comments again. But it is an interesting about turn within 6 months basically. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that game. I think that'll be a good one. Also Dublin against Clare. I think that's
just a quick one, Shane. I put up a poll just before the show went live. Wexford had this absolute beauty of a jersey, and everybody will see it online. And it's actually it's kind of a navy top. I don't know what kind of looks like. They're sponsored by Zurich. It actually kind of looks like a rugby jersey, but they've got a W up here. It's got a W across here in the Wexford colours. In the amber, and what's the other colour? The actual colour, purple and gold, I should say, purple and gold, and it's an absolute beauty. Lee Chin is kind of advertising it there, and I just said, where does this beauty rank among GA jerseys? What's your favourite of all time? Just got a few interesting comments in. You think of what your favourite one is there. Niall Garrity sent on, he's over in Thailand, sent on this absolute peach of one. It's actually sponsored by Anche Lin, so it's cool that even though they're playing in Thailand that they have Irish sponsors. The name of the pub, I think on the front of it, I think it's a pub, it's called Shenanigans, which is a great name. Ronan Fagan said Offaly GA alternate from the early 90s. The white jersey that Offaly wore in the 1982 All-Ireland football final when they beat Kerry is an absolute beauty. John Darcy said can't beat the retros, especially this classic. He's got a lovely jersey up, Eugene Coughlin wearing an Offaly jersey from, I'd say it's probably 84, 85, a beauty. And the Arga Retro kind of took advantage of or sensed and saw how much people like these retro jerseys. In fairness, he's got some lovely ones up at the moment. Ducking and Diving said, we all know the right answer is Offaly 1982 All-Ireland final jersey. I don't know, very few people will remember it because I'm not sure if they ever even wore the jersey, but Offaly had an alternate jersey around the time of the 2000 All-Ireland final. It was a white one with Carol Meats on the front of it. It was even nicer, I would say, than the 1982 jersey, and I had one of it, but I think I lost it in school or something. That would have been my favourite jersey, either that or the old Cork ESAT Digiphone 1999 jersey. That was an absolute beauty as well. What about your own kind of personal favourite?
I can't think of the year, but there was a couple of those Kerry ones that were unbelievable. And, you know, of that era when Kerry and Offaly were playing each other, there was some beauties. The Tipperary one last year, the centenary one, I really liked that, the white with the green hoop. I think that's a great one. I think get your comments into us. I think we all love some of those jerseys around. Well, I certainly love all those ones when I was a kid around late 80s, early 90s. The Tipperary one that had, and Galway had the same, where they had the blocky numbers with the lines going the whole way across them. So that was just a little bit different. I like that. The Kerry jersey around 2000, the Adidas one with the big blocky,
Beautiful.
Was it blue numbers? I think they were very cool. So definitely get your comments in and let us know what you think.
And what's the worst jersey of all time?
Oh,
like I sorry now, like, but some of the Kildare jerseys have been awful. It's just because there's very little to work with. I think some of the Carlow jerseys have just had probably too much going on in them at different times as well.
Yeah, did you like the Waterford jerseys that had Yop on them in the mid 2000s?
I actually thought they were okay. No,
Yeah,
I think
like
it was
them.
Yop. Yeah, I think it was actually okay. Clinton Hennessy used to wear the white and blue striped jersey, which was quite nice as well. But there's some counties it's difficult. Like, what do you do with Kildare? Like, what do you do with their home jersey? In fairness to them, their away jersey was quite nice. It was that kind of metallic kind of grey colour, which was nice. But just some of them have very little to work with. In fairness to them.
Yeah, I think Sligo generally have a nice jersey. I think they have a good one at the moment. We'll move on to Dublin against Clare. There's an interview with Shawnee McMahon coming up on our game later this evening, Thursday around 8 o'clock. That's coming out, so keep an eye out for that. The legend, he talks about John Conlon playing centre back. He, of course, made it famous himself. But Dublin against Clare. Now, we've already been asked the question by Michael Lucy, and he goes, I'm not anti-Matty Kenny, just want Dublin to do well. Honestly, no disrespect intended, but there's not the same buzz, that's all. I'm only asking what you think needs to happen. And it's just keep working with the players they have and try and get the most out of them, find the right balance. They've obviously tried to rip up the script a little bit by putting Chris Crummy up the field. A couple of the older statesmen have exited the fray in the last year or so. Paul Ryan and Conal Keeney and what have you. Liam Rush has gone back to centre back. They've still got a good spine to the team, but it's just trying to find those scores and find the right match between Danny Sutcliffe kind of getting on the score sheet, but trying to bring other players into the game and find that right balance, trying to get Keane Boland onto the ball enough. Maybe Keane O'Sullivan can step up. There's good talent there, but they're probably just lacking that one or two players. And we've kind of said it many times, but I think they can be competitive with most teams, but it's just up at the sharp end of the field that it starts to fall away now and again.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I do think there's very little buzz around Dublin, and there hasn't been probably since that night they beat Galway up in Parnell. There's just not that same enthusiasm about them. There's not that same kind of optimism. I'd love to imagine if Con just jumped over to the hurlers. Imagine that would literally have the same effect as, and probably even more of an effect of, let's say, Keeney jumping from the footballers to the hurlers. Like Daly has always said that totally rejuvenated the hurlers. It made everyone believe. I think he came in. Yeah, he would have came in around the time they were beaten by Antrim when they were at a bit of a low. They beaten in that qualifier in Croke Park, and all of a sudden everybody else started to believe in Dublin hurling. The reason Keeney hadn't been there previously was because Dublin hurling was a bit of a shambles, and they weren't really at the same levels as a lot of the other top counties. All of a sudden he was back. Everyone started believing again. They won a league, they won a Leinster. They could have, they were close in All Ireland semi-final. If Con jumped to the hurlers, no, genuinely, optimism would soar through Dublin hurling, and then all of a sudden, anybody that's not in there that should be in there would all of a sudden be back in there. You'd think you have this lightning rod in attack that could just literally, one player could light up a whole team. You could be hitting 1-3 or 1-4 per game. All of a sudden, players would start believing again. I'd be surprised if some of your Coola teammates or Coola clubmates that maybe aren't in with Dublin or maybe in other far-flung regions of the world, I'd be surprised if they weren't back involved as well. It would be, I do literally think they need something like that to happen just for the whole thing to electrify again.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good match this weekend, and we're kind of running out of time here, so we'll just move on quickly. One of the comments coming in, Bert Giggles Ash Tiger, stopping the analysis to show yourself score a few points is the equivalent of Patrick Bateman tensing the arm on the bed, looking in the mirror, an American Psycho, dying about yourself, Stapleton. Bit harsh. I mean, the other day I showed myself messing up when you and I did a challenge, so...
Don't think it's in any way harsh. I think it's totally, it totally reflects the truth.
Okay, let's move on to Division 2A this weekend. Meath against Carlow, Kerry against Wicklow, Offaly against Down. The Offaly game moved from Burt to Tullamore, much to the annoyance of South Offaly folk.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. This game was fixed for Burr. I'm obviously from Burr, so I have a skin in the game. But Michael Verney wanted the game moved to Tullamore because they had played in Tullamore already this year, and obviously maybe are a bit more familiar with it. They hadn't played in Burr since, I'm going to say, last January or February, I'd say. There was some COVID concerns about size of dressing rooms and things like that thrown out. Listen, I'm not so sure whether they're legitimate claims or whether they just wanted to be in maybe a bigger pitch. But the only thing that matters here really is that Offaly need to get a result. And I think some people, and I was even just chatting a few lads at training last night, people don't actually realise just how big this game is. So Down have won 2 out of 3 so far. But if Down beat Offaly and win their last game, then Offaly and Down on the same points, and Down have beaten Offaly in the head-to-head. So Down would go up to Division 1, which would be unbelievable for them, having been beaten in a Ring Cup final last year. They obviously, I think they were only promoted from 2B last year. So to go from 2B to 2A to Division 1 would be savage, and it'd be some kind of clap for what Ronan Sheehan has done there. Just interesting one. Optimism is very, very high in Offaly at the moment. The hurlers are going well. The footballers are, 70 minutes away from Division 2 as well. The Camogie team had a win against Dublin a couple of weeks ago. Fair enough, they were beaten against Kilkenny heavily enough at the weekend. The ladies footballers have had 2 wins. Lowry's even going well in the golf. It looks like the whole thing is kind of coming together, and all of a sudden there's a bit of optimism about it. The chairman, Michael Dignan, just said, it's a crucial game because if we win, we're guaranteed promotion. I'd call it positive pressure, but when you're playing sport, you want to feel that challenge on you to improve all the time. It's a big game. There's no point in trying to pretend it's not. We've been down for quite a while. We've lost a lot of ground, and we're in a Christie Ring Cup on results over the last few years, and for no other reason. We slipped from McCarthy to McDonough down to Ring. Maybe not winning the Ring Cup last year was a wake-up call. They've responded really well and put themselves in a very positive position. They've put up huge scores in their 3 games. And I think massive scores, regardless of what grade you're playing at and who you're playing against. Particularly the massive score against Kerry, who have had the strong arm on them in recent years. I think anything other than an Offaly win here would be a surprise based on how comprehensively they won their games. But obviously Down beat them in that Ring Cup last year, beat them in that penalty shootout. If anything, that should, give Offaly even more of an impetus. But this is, outside of Limerick and Cork and Waterford and Galway, to me, this is probably the biggest game of the weekend.
Yeah, Carlow will certainly be looking to get more points on the board against Meath. They're only stuck on 2 points at this stage, and Kerry will probably fancy their chances against Wicklow. The Division 2B, Derry are against Donegal and Roscommon are against Kildare, and finishing up with Division 3B round 4, Louder against Fermanagh and Leitrim are against Cavan. So any final thoughts on those before we finish up?
No, Donegal had a right good win last weekend. Kildare are in pole position in 2B. They've had 2 really, really good wins so far. And in 3B, I think Louth are top of the table on 4 points. I think I was looking at the table there a minute ago. Yeah, Louth have won their 2 games so far. Fermanagh have won 1 and drawn 1. So still lots to play for there. But Jesus, some really, really good games, juicy games to get stuck into this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And get any comments into us on social media at Our Game HQ. If you want to get this on podcast, audio podcast, subscribe to the Patreon channel. The link is underneath the video on YouTube. So that's it for this Thursday show. Michael, enjoy the games at the weekend, and we'll chat to you after the weekend.
Good stuff, Shane. Cheers.
The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpey. Torpey are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpey's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpey website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off.